buckle up, because we're about to dive into the most controversial part of Genesis 10, the mysterious northern peoples that show up in end times prophecy. Magog, Meshek, and Tubal. These aren't just ancient names. They're players in Ezekiel's vision of the last days. Some people think they're Russia. Others say Turkey. Still others claim Central Asia. But before we get all left behind about it, let's figure out who these people actually were historically, because that story is wild enough without the speculation. Genesis 10:2. In the Berean Standard Bible simply lists them: the sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshek, and Tiras. But Ezekiel 38-39 explodes with detail about Gog, of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshek and Tubal. Then Revelation 20-8 puts Gog and Magog at the final battle of history. No pressure, but these genealogies suddenly become cosmic prophecy. Let's start with what we actually know. Josephus says Magog founded the Scythians, those terrifying horse warriors who dominated the steppes from Ukraine to Mongolia. These guys were so scary that when they showed up, entire civilizations just packed up and left. They perfected mounted archery, drank from the skulls of their enemies, and covered themselves in tattoos. They also created some of the most beautiful golden artwork ever discovered, preserved in frozen Siberian tombs. The Scythians weren't just random barbarians. They controlled the Silk Road before it was called the Silk Road. They connected China to Europe, facilitating trade that shaped civilizations. Their burial mounds, called Kurgans, stretch across thousands of miles. When archaeologists opened the frozen tombs in the Altai Mountains, they found 2,500-year-old bodies with tattoos still visible, Chinese silk, Persian carpets, and local gold work. These people were connected globally before globalization was a thing. Meshek and Tubal often appear together in ancient sources. Assyrian records from the 8th century BC mention Mushki and Tubal as kingdoms in eastern Turkey. The Greeks called them Moshki and Tibereni. Ezekiel 27-13 says they traded slaves and bronze with Tyre. These weren't nomads. They were metalworkers who possibly introduced iron technology to the ancient Near East. Some scholars think they gave Moscow its name, though that's debated. Here's where it gets interesting for prophecy buffs. These northern peoples kept appearing at crucial historical moments. Scythians helped destroy the Assyrian Empire. They prevented Persian expansion northward. Later waves, Huns, Goths, Vikings, Mongols, all followed routes established by these early peoples. Every few centuries, the North would explode and reshape history. It's like God kept this pressure valve that he would release to judge empires. The archaeological evidence is mind-blowing. Scythian animal art shows up from the Black Sea to China, proving their vast reach. DNA from Scythian burials shows they were Indo-European peoples who mixed with Asian populations as they moved east. Modern populations from Eastern Europe to Central Asia carry their genetic markers. The Ossetians in the Caucasus claim direct descent and may preserve their language. Now, about that Russia connection. Some interpreters point out that Ezekiel 38-2 mentions Rosh in some translations, which sounds like Russia. Moscow sounds like Meshek. Tobolsk in Siberia sounds like Tubal. But most Hebrew scholars say Rosh just means chief or head, not a place name. The linguistic connections are forced. However, the geographical area north of Israel does include modern Russia, so the connection isn't totally crazy, just not linguistically proven. What's fascinating is how these northern peoples eventually embraced Christianity. The Scythians who terrorized the ancient world. Their descendants include many Eastern European Christians. Russia, despite Soviet atheism, preserved Orthodox Christianity. Georgia, possibly connected to Tubal, claims their Christianity goes back to the apostles. These fierce northern warriors became defenders of the faith. The religious history of the steppes is complex. Before Christianity, these peoples practiced elaborate burial rituals, suggesting strong afterlife beliefs. Their art shows shamanistic themes, but also sky god worship that some scholars see as preparation for monotheism. When Byzantine missionaries arrived, they found prepared ground. The conversion of the Rus, Vikings who founded Russia, in 988 AD, brought Christianity to the northern forests and steppes. Modern DNA studies show fascinating patterns. Haplogroup R1a, associated with Scythian expansion, spreads from Poland to India. Central Asian peoples show amazing genetic diversity, the crossroads of humanity. These migrations Genesis describes aren't just stories. They're written in our genes. Every person from Eastern Europe to Central Asia carries evidence of these ancient movements. So what about the prophecy stuff? Here's my take. Ezekiel's vision uses these northern peoples as symbols of distant, mysterious forces opposing God's people. Throughout history, threats have come from the north: Scythians, Huns, Vikings, Mongols, Russians. The prophecy works on multiple levels and may have multiple fulfillments. Instead of trying to identify specific modern nations, understand the pattern. Distant powers, eventually challenging God's kingdom. Your takeaway? First, God's sovereignty extends to the ends of the earth. These distant peoples weren't outside his plan. Second, the Bible's geographical knowledge is stunning. It accurately describes peoples and places across thousands of miles. Third, no one is too fierce for the gospel. The Scythians who drank from skulls became Christians who drank from communion cups. Fourth, prophecy is complex. Don't build theology on speculation about Russia or Turkey. Focus on what's clear. God wins in the end. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.